Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining this channel, Hias Alma Somatics. My name is Hias Alma. I am a somatic movement educator and a researcher and a speaker. And in today's episode, we have a very special guest, a South African dance artist, a teacher, Butoh practitioner, a cultural activist, a researcher in dance, and a colleague that I celebrate and honor so much. I've been to his classes and workshops online, and we connected over a conversation about sacred dance and spirituality. So, Tebby Ramasike, thank you so much for joining us today. Today's episode is about dance and movement and the voice. And we're excited to hear your thoughts about this. Tibby, tell us something more about your movement practices and what you teach and how vocal voice comes up in your classes and your work.
Good day, and thanks very much for inviting me. It's a great honor to be here, and good morning, everybody. Pleased to share my insights about this topic. My practices, it's Afrofusion, Afro-contemporary, Afro swing groove and township jive, and also my own concept of the Afro-Butoh.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and tell us, so what, for example, Afro-Butoh, what is your own concept of Afro-Butoh? It's so interesting just hearing these names, but maybe these titles, the practices, but maybe for the listener, we don't have a clear feeling of what some of these movements, these practices look like.
That's true, because Afro-Butoh is not something that's practiced that often. So my concept of Afro-Butoh, first of all, it's not a style or method of dance. It's a concept and it's an ongoing research. I am working with the spirituality of African ritual dances and the spirituality of Butoh. The main focus in this practice or concept, if I should say that, is the transformation of the body, the transformation of energy, and the transformation of emotions. And what I am working with in this spirituality is how the principles of Butoh and the principles of African rituals, not in their traditional or ethnic sense, they can come together, finding the similarities, the parallels and differences, and how when they meet, what happens in that fusion. So from that, I actually came up with this concept of the Afro-Butoh. Of course, there is some people who are teaching Afro-Butoh or doing Afro-Butoh, but it's totally different from what I'm doing. It's a totally different. So my scope is that focus on African ritual dances and Butoh in the spiritual sense.
Oh, how interesting. And how did you find, for example, Butoh as a form of expression? How did it come to you? Is there a story behind that?
Oh, it's a very long story. Well, it started in 2001. When I was commissioned to do a piece, to collaborate with another choreographer who has a different movement vocabulary to mine. So after toiling around, thinking of Afro-contemporary or Afro-jazz, and then I came across a Butoh artist, Butoh dancer from Japan, but lived in Amsterdam. And I invited her to collaborate with me. Her name is Sayoko Onishi. And so we actually, first thing that we did was like just talk our ideas, but she had to leave to go and work in Italy. and she stayed there basically. So we actually exchanged our ideas via email. And when she came back to Amsterdam, we worked for 3 days, but we actually didn't know what we were doing. So I had this crazy idea of the animal inside our own cultures and the animals that we were connected with spirituality, with spiritually. So I asked her what was the animal in her own culture, the Japanese culture, that she was connected with spiritually, and I told her about mine. So we shared these stories, and she showed me movements in the Japanese way, and I showed her movements in the African way. And then we came up with an title of the piece being The Animal Inside Culture. So we focused on that. So I realized, being a Butoh practitioner and her being also a Butoh dancer artist, that the way she moved, because she moved in the Japanese way, I moved, we did the same movements, but I moved in an African way. So she had this soft quality and I had this hard quality. So it was the sort of like very interesting. So I tried to be her, she tried to be me. In actual fact, she became more African than me, which was like kind of like interesting. And so as we developed our ideas, we realized that there was something really brewing. And then I had to give a workshop, and somebody asked me, how do I describe my workshop? I said, oh, I have no idea. I think it's Afro-Butoh. And I don't know, it just came up. I don't know why. And then a friend of mine who was in the ballet company with me said, finally, you know what you are doing. Afro-Butoh suits you. That's you. So I got stuck.
Yes.
Afro-Butoh.
Or another way to say this is that, like, you found your voice, talking about voice in a different way. Like that's, I feel like bringing these different traditions together, really you found your voice as a dance artist and an educator.
Yes, I think that Afro-Butoh became my voice and it became my trademark, basically. And as many people say, it actually describes what I am doing. And because many years ago, people was like saying, oh, your work is so dramatic and all that. So it was like basically like dance drama, avant-garde. And but discovering the Butoh and discovering this Afro-Butoh concept became something that is Tebby. You know, like as most of my Butoh colleagues would say, I'm the founder of Afro-Butoh. I have no idea. But it feels good when people say that, although that I know that there is people doing Afro-Butoh, but saying I am the founder of Afro-Butoh, I think in this sense, because many people are not used to that. So now, since I brought it into the public after many years of practicing it only for myself, because I wasn't sure how it will relate to the public and what I was actually doing, I actually questioned myself many times, what is Afro-Butoh? What do you want to do with Afro-Butoh? What is the meaning behind it? And what do you want to share with the general public doing Afro-Butoh? And how do you want to deliver it? So there were all these questions. But after 5 years, eventually, when I was invited to perform in Paris and give a workshop, that's when actually I realized, oh, finally it works. And now I am ready to take it into the public.
Yes, I love the sentence, "This is Tebby," because as soon as you mentioned this sentence, I was like, ah, this is amazing because through dance we can also discover who we are. Like we can find, and I maybe a lot of the viewers don't see themselves necessarily as professional dancers, but the idea that through movement we can find our path, I think is a powerful one, and I think it goes really well with your what you mentioned earlier about transformation also. Self.
Yes, Yes, because it's kind of like it identifies me. It's basically like I found my own identity. Because actually, this Afro-Butoh, like also this project, the Animal Inside Cultures, I actually used it for my dissertation. I think I told you the last time we had an interview for my master's in choreography in 2004. That's when I did my thesis. That's when I graduated. And so it also has been like finding my own identity, finding who I am and what I want to be and what I want to share and what I want to give to the public, to the community at large, not only the dance people, but the community at large. Because for myself, personally, I believe that dance belongs to the people and should be brought back to the people. And this is another way of sharing this because I think Buto is for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has their own Buto, and African rituals is the same. The same is for everybody and belongs to the people. So this is where I find my own voice of talking to people
Yes.
through my dance and movement practice.
That's a beautiful look how listeners pay attention to how this played out right now. We were going to talk about the physical voice, but we started with something that was much bigger and really identity and who we are as people and what is the voice, what is the message that we bring to the world with our work. Debbie, before we go any further, I have this question I have to ask you. So tell us something about how you started in South Africa as a dancer. Like were you always dancing? Like in what context did you dance? In South Africa? Were you part of, did you go to, I don't know, dance rituals in your culture, or were there classes, or was it just part of, I don't know, the life of the outside somehow on the streets? And
Well, as a child, basically being an African child, you are born to, well, I should say, well, born to dance. I used to have this T-shirt written "Born to Dance." So I was always entertaining people as a kid, like waking up 5 o'clock in the morning and singing and dancing. Because like in the black townships, like people were going to work, like in the factories and all that, like 4 a.m., 5 a.m., they are on the road. So I was dancing. And when I went to visit my grandparents, I collected all my little friends and we went to this space, which was like a platform. It was a broken building, but they left the foundation there. So it was sort of like a stage, and I was like the leader. And I was basically like choreographing and singing and leading and entertaining people. If I had known that you could be rich, then I could, but nobody was encouraging me. And also, my uncle was taking me to parties, and I was being put on a table because I was so minute and to dance and sing for people. Even I was dancing and singing in weddings and parties. But also after schools, we used to go to a recreation club where I did like Latin and ballroom dance. But then I got bored with that because I thought, it was for old people. So, and then friends of mine were doing ballet. And so I went to do ballet, but it was just for recreation. I didn't think that I was going to be a dancer. I wanted to be a doctor at that time. So I was just doing it for fun. And then later on, a few years later, I went into modern dance and then jazz dance. And I remember to one of my dance teachers then, he said, "You have magic in your eyes. You have to continue dancing." And then at the same time, I was also doing acting. And I remember was in 1973. Oh, that gives away my age.
you look ageless.
Was a photographer, and he said, "You have to not stop acting because you're an amazing actor, and you have to stay in the performing arts." Of course, I was this little 8-year-old kid, and I didn't know what he was meaning, and I didn't know this was the pathway I will go. But then eventually, when I applied to go to university to do medicine,
Mm.
and I said to myself, well, if I cannot get into med school, and then I can get into the arts. So my first choice was medicine, and second choice was dramatic arts. And I was told at the interview that I was a little confused kid. I was at the 16-year-old because you don't mix medicine and the arts. But look what's happening today.
Yes.
Medicine and the arts is one thing, because we actually have dance and medicine. We have the School of Dance Medicine or medicine school, something like that. I mean, so everything is connected. But in those days, this was not really a thing that was being practiced. And so, but then I went to med school, but there was a call to go into the arts because after I was still like continuing with my ballet classes, contemporary dance, modern dance, and acting. But then I just sort of like, that was in 1984. And then I decided, no, I have to really go into the arts because that's a big call. And then 1987, I just basically full time and then said, like, this is just going to be my profession. This is what I have to go and study. Of course, my parents were opposing this because they say, yeah, but you're a Black kid, you have talent, you don't have to go and learn how to act, you don't have to go and learn how to dance because it's all in your blood. And I said, yes, but this is another thing, the politics thing, like, I will be the first Black this theater agent in South Africa, and all they're trying to convince my parents to pay for that because they're like, we don't pay for you to go be a dancer, we don't pay for you to be an actor. So it's natural, but eventually in the end, I convinced them. I said, yeah, as the first Black, la, 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 la. So, okay, fine. So it's basically like making history. So I got stuck with the arts, so I forgot about the sciences and I just like continued with my ballet training, with my modern dance, contemporary dance training and acting as well. So my first profession was as an actor. And then eventually in 1991, I decided to divert from acting to become a full-time professional dancer.
Mm.
So I joined the ballet company in 1991.
Oh, how interesting. What a rich background. And you are making history indeed in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
How does voice, let's talk about the physical voice. So how does voice manifest itself in the classes that you teach or in your work? The physical voice, the spoken voice. What do you want to say about it?
Well, I sometimes use text
Yes.
and especially poetry. And I have experienced it with when I was in the ballet company. I choreographed a piece with dancers. Actually, this kind of like shocked me because using my background as an actor, and I always wanted to use voice and use text and also storytelling because storytelling is also part of my cultural background. As a South African, we tell a lot of stories. And so I had asked these ballerinas to use voice. Actually, they shocked me, screamed at me. They said, "We are dancers. We don't talk on stage." I said, "Well, you have to talk." Basically, in those days, I was that kind of like a tough cookie of like, do as I tell you, So you're not gonna oppose my ideas.
Mhm.
In a way, I realized that actually dancers don't talk. They don't feel comfortable talking. But for me, I felt comfortable, I think, because of my acting background. But then when I actually came to the Netherlands and I encountered dancers who were comfortable using voice and text. And I actually envied them because they were dancing, they were moving and talking at the same time. And then I just thought, like, this is something that I have to focus on and put the dancers and also put myself to practice movement and voice together so that the voice and the body become one, so that doesn't become two separate entities. Because for me, it's basically like the voice is the soul of the body. You know what I mean?
No.
Yeah, yes, basically, like symbolically, that soul is the inner body, and that voice is the inner self. Basically, like the body and the voice talking to each other, so that, and also connecting as well. Because I work a lot with the soul, but that soul is something that's inside of the person, that's inside of me. And that soul, it's that collective of the body and the voice. And what I also use, it's sounds. So the sounds don't even have to have a meaning. They can be just sounds, like sometimes, because I work a lot with musicians, and I put my musicians, because musicians most of the times they don't move. So they only play, but I always want them to feel what the dancers do, how they move, and also putting the dancers to become a musical instrument, to actually make sounds themselves, to actually sing the rhythm. And also like sometimes this one exercise that I do, like walking and like just like taking the voice and like just like shouting it out, and I find that is releasing. So shouting, also using vowels like with the breath, like oh, and then chanting or singing. So also following the breath, like just whoa. Also the exercise of just humming or closing your eyes and then just like humming the sound. So some say, and chanting is actually one of the best ways that I use, especially like when I'm teaching my Afro chakras workshops. So I use this a lot. So it's yeah.
Tibby, I have a question.
Mhm.
I love this. This is an unexpected turn of things also for me, because so I've been thinking a lot about, and also through movement experiencing this, and through meditation and my own little prayer practices, like how to connect to my soul, how to find the guidance of my soul. And so when you said this dimension in myself, and then you said, oh, to me, the body, the voice is the soul.
Mhm.
Voice is the soul of the body. So now my question is this. When I speak, when I use my voice, it is easy for me to connect to my thoughts, the verbal part of me. So mm, my thoughts, the rational side, the storytelling side, da, 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 da. But I think what you're saying is something different, and I can already intuit where you would go with the answer also, because you explained this to
Yeah.
some extent. But explain this to us a little more. How can I connect to my soul, which is, I think, somehow like a non-verbal part of me? I can't access it with my words so well. How can I connect to my soul through my voice and make sure that I'm actually not connecting to my brain, my mind, my rational thinking? I don't know if I make the question clear.
That's kind of like a tough question, because I think everybody has a different way of a different approach.
Mhm.
And I think it lies in being confident. And I always say people just
Mhm.
need to let go of their thoughts, especially because when one starts to think like it is not possible to get there, or I do not believe I can do this, then it actually blocks everything. Because once one can actually just like have that belief and have that confidence, actually stepping away, stepping out of their own comfort zone, going into that discomfort and opening up and saying, okay, I have never been here, but I would like to go there. I believe I can actually achieve that. That is when one can actually let go of their thoughts and actually reach to own inner self where the soul is. Because from that, something can really come up that one never thought is possible to actually reach or be able to achieve. But everybody is different. So it actually takes one the idea of that I need to let go. I need to let go. I need to believe in myself. I need to trust this moment. It doesn't come just overnight. It takes time. It really takes time. I always say, don't stress if you don't get it now. Because if you stress, you block yourself. Because then you are not going to achieve what you want. Just give it time. Breathe into that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Give your head space. Give your thoughts space. Breathe into your skin. Breathe into your inner self. Because your inner voice is your journey. Your inner voice is your breath. Your inner voice is the movement. Your inner voice is your body.
Uh-huh.
So that's what it is. It just takes that openness. And I mean, like when I teach dance, I see this happening a lot. People blocking because they are overthinking. Of course, in the beginning, we need our thoughts. We need to think, we all that, and we forget our body. What is our body supposed to do? Because we are busy here, and that blocks. And also, that blocks the affects the way we breathe, and the way we breathe also is about how we deliver a speech, how we use our voice. Because I know for myself, sometimes when I'm stressed, my voice comes out in a totally different way. And then it's sort of like, oh my God, what have I just done? Because I'm like in this state, because I don't believe in what either I want to do or I want to say. So I lose that confidence. And it's just like just stepping away for a moment from that comfort zone. And I think people, we all need to just like get out of our comfort zone.
Yes.
We are there all the time. We know that place. We need to go somewhere where we don't know, where we can actually challenge ourselves. And it's just not like a 1 minute thing, but it takes a lot. It can take days, it can take weeks, it can take years. Because I remember when I was teaching in the Netherlands many years ago, and my students just couldn't understand about the energy of the voice and the energy of the body. But after 2 years, finally, they were saying, I found it, I found it, I found it. Even for myself, I remember was in 1985, I was actually in confrontation with my own body because I couldn't let go of my voice. And I couldn't understand why all these people around me were using their voice and all that and moving. And it took me 2 years. And when it happened, it felt like something broke inside of me. And I cried. And I said to my professor and said, I found something. And that changed the way I understood my body as a dancer, the way I understood myself as a human being relating to dance and to relating to my own practice. And I actually stepped out of my comfort zone because I was always in my comfort zone. I
Interesting.
was doing all that I always did, those bad habits, everything. instead of like trying to find something.
Oh, how interesting. So when you said letting go of my voice, you mean like release your voice, like actually let the voice out. Is that what you meant by letting go of my voice?
It's really to go into your gut and find where your voice is coming from deep down.
That's right.
That's where the soul is embedded. And
Yeah.
just let it opening inside. And breathing is the most important.
Mm.
And also clearing your thoughts.
Yeah.
Because when your thoughts are clouded, it's not really easy to let your voice come out in a very comfortable way.
I see where my confusion came from also, because earlier when I posed this question, to me, my first association was voice, meaning language, meaning thoughts, meaning I hear myself speak through my voice. But the way in which you describe voice right now is like finding the voice through like chanting and sounds and sounding and singing. And voice is a voice itself. Voice is not necessarily attached to language and meaning and words right away. Yes, and it's very different as a way of approaching things. Oh, this is so exciting. Wait a second, I had a question right away. I forgot my question now. I was listening to you and then I had a question in mind. Mm. So in this comment that you just gave us, I was like, wow, there's another moment of you, a powerful moment of you finding your voice as a dancer. Earlier, we talked about you finding the Afro-Butoh as a way of your identity as a mover and teacher. But now you were talking about this one particular moment where you found yourself as a dancer through finding the physical voice that came out of you. That's very interesting too. Tebby, what would you say to, let's imagine that there are some listeners here who are saying, yeah, this all sounds very interesting, but why would I, as a person who's not necessarily a performer, who doesn't spend a lot of time on the stage, or maybe not at all, why would it matter to me? Why is it important for me to somehow put movement, the body, and voice together? Like, why come to one of your classes, let's say, and explore the voice? Like, what is the use of that to me?
Oh, how do I answer that now? I
Yes.
just,
What are some of the benefits? So one of the benefit that you mentioned in a very powerful way is, it connects you to your soul. So but what else would you add? Why do this kind of exploration of movement and the voice like together? Because I could go and take some voice classes. Let's say I'm a speaker, I need some I need more expressiveness and skills in my public presentation, so I go to a voice teacher. Yes, we work with the body in terms of breathing exercises and things like this and relaxation, but I mostly focus on my voice. Or I could go and take movement classes with a movement person. But why put those two closely together, movement and voice?
I think they're interrelated in a way. There's well, it depends on how the voice is being used in relation to movement.
Mhm.
But for myself personally, I think voice and movement is interrelated because even in our daily lives, we don't have to be artists or performers or whatever.
Yeah.
When we have a conversation with somebody, we use movement. If I like example, if I watch Italians talk,
Yeah.
no, they use their body, the body language. I mean, sometimes, for instance, like let's say growing up in South Africa, we had this group, the Pansolas. We had our language and we used our body like, that's already voice, and actually it gives you the confidence and it gives you that status. It's also how you deliver yourself as well. So you actually don't need to be an artist or anything. You just have to find that interrelationship in how you deliver and how you use your voice in that connection. So that relationship is very important. I mean, sometimes the voice and body can be independent, but at the same time, they also complement each other.
Yes.
Well, so there is how do you say um what is this word now? My English is going. um,
In some other language.
um, yeah, the support system. So the support system of the voice and the body movement, and I have seen many people talk just like walking in the street, like talking to each other. And I'm like, as a choreographer, I'm always observing people, how they relate to each other. For instance, like I could meet somebody and I could just talk just with my voice without using my body. But then I meet the next person and I talk with them using my body and voice at the same time, and maybe probably saying the same thing, and it's also about the relationship of the people, how you connect to the other person, how you connect to the environment that you're in. Because sometimes also the environment or the mood as well can actually affect how you use your voice and how you use your body as well. Because sometimes some environment can put somebody into a cold situation. Sometimes can somebody is very vibrant and all that. So there's another, and then when you vibrate, either your voice is going up or, especially when people are so happy clappy, and we call them happy clappy, the voice tends to go up. Sometimes when you talk like normally, and sometimes the voice is down, sometimes that's why it also depends on the person, on relationships as well, with the environment, with people, with what is happening around you as well. So many factors affect the voice and the body, and it's for everybody, each person is different.
Yes. I love the way in which you said we speak with the voice and the body at the same time.
Yes.
Just listening to you and watching you also, listeners, and are you watching and seeing our body language too? I feel like both of these are very expressive parts of us, the voice and the body. Like imagine, listeners, for example, imagine that we were here speaking and there's no expressiveness in our voices. It's like monotone. So we take these things for granted, but it's not to be taken for granted by the way in which the voice also lifts up the room, lifts up the space, conveys emotion, is just as expressive as body and physical movement can be too.
Yes, there is something that I just want to add into what I
Mhm.
said, which just came to mind, is that like now this is related to dance. Sometimes I always say to my dancers, even to myself, is talk with your body. Let your body become your own voice. And I was just saying this during the workshop this last Sunday, the one you wanted to come to, and I was saying to the participants of the workshop, talk to me with your body. And I said to them, when I was teaching at the academy, I was telling the dancers to talk with their bodies. They were like thinking, oh my God, you probably need a shrink. How do you talk with your body? Because the thing is that in the dance world, when you start to talk about the voice or talking, the only thing about it has to come from the mouth. They
Yes.
don't understand that the body talks and the body is the voice. You know,
Yes.
that's another thing.
Yes.
And I remind myself there is a public that's watching you. You are talking to the public. You don't need to deliver a speech orally, but you're delivering a speech with your body. It's silent.
Yes.
The body is making that sound,
Mhm.
not the need to hear you. I know this is kind of like a strange, crazy philosophy, but I love it because it challenges me. and it challenges the people I work with, and it's kind of like it's an interesting process. It's actually interesting to see how also that brings out the humanity in that artist. Because we as artists, we always forget that we're human beings. We always think like we just like doing, especially dancers, we forget that I breathe, I'm a human being. And my task is for the public to see that how human can that be? Instead of just focusing on technique and all that, but the way you deliver the story that you tell with your body without using voice, because your body is your own voice, is very important. And that brings out the human in you. And that connects with that human being sitting there watching you because you're talking to them. You're having a conversation.
Yes, I think this is very powerful. So one dimension of discussion that I love and find very insightful is the discussion of the voice and the performing artist, the dancer, because I know dancers who have gone into dancing precisely because they don't want to speak. They want to express through their bodies. And then I know dancers who have stopped dancing because they feel like, well, but I want to speak. Let me become a professor and a writer where my voice, my vocal voice is also heard. So that's one dimension that's very interesting. But the second one, when I was taking notes here, you said, like, talk to me. You tell your dancers, talk to me with your body. And I was imagining this as not necessarily in the world of dance and performance on the stage, but as people in their daily lives. And I was like, wow, if I learn the skill of this person is actually talking to me with their body, then I have to learn the skill of listening also. It highlights the how good are we at listening what the other people are telling us through their bodies and not through their words also. And that I think is a beautiful, humane, like it makes us, like I can think of episodes in my life where I feel like, wow, this person was actually delivering something to me with their hands or with movements. Were I able to listen and take that message in? It becomes it adds this very beautiful human dimension to what listening and speaking, talking and listening, what they can be, that they're not just verbal, but they're nonverbal also in very beautiful ways. Yes. Debbie, do you think there's a Oh, I have so many things to ask, but I have to start letting you go. Well, maybe we come for a second back to this very intriguing aspect of ritualistic dance, and dance is a ritual that you bring with your heritage also. And animalistic movement, you mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation, moving like animals in your dance teaching and your own practice. Do you also rely on those two? Like, let me find my voice through finding the sounds of animals inside of me, mimicking or like discovering them, like, And then secondly, do you use these like dance ritual, like chanting elements also in your work, using voice in that kind of sacred way?
I don't really use the voices of the animals in my works. And I actually just use my inner voice, which is my spiritual voice, basically, which is actually kind of like a ritualistic. And like with chanting, actually, it's because as a child, when I was 6 years old, actually, I was exposed to a ritual of the sangomas, which is like the shaman, the divine healers, in when I was in South Africa. And actually, as a child, you're not allowed to see this. And this is where actually my interest in ritual dances began, because I always had a question of why am I not a sangoma? Why am I not a shaman? Why am I not a divine healer? And then at that time, I didn't know that or understand that you have to be chosen. You have to be the chosen one by the ancestors and whatever. But I learned that when I was getting older. But the thing is, I remember when I started with this, like as a child, and the voice was the first thing that was like, that's already going into my body. that actually that voice made my body just vibrate, going like into that trance or some kind of like spirit overtaking me. And I actually use this in a lot of my performances of this, this kind of thing. So it's a cross between animalistic and humanity. So I cannot really describe it, but I don't want to say it's animal movement, voices.
Mm.
And of course, I get influenced by animal sounds that I use as music
Oh,
or as
interesting.
escape. Like, for instance, like crickets, like in South Africa, we have all these crickets or bird sounds as well. And, or even like the lion roaring in the middle of of a very dark African night. That also like sparks a different energy into the body. And at the same time, it awakens something. It awakens the soul. It lifts up the spirit into something else. And it's just like, how do I feel? For instance, if I'm performing my Butoh solos, and I always my body gets overtaken by some foreign, undescribable spirit or energy and voice. And that energy is that voice that I don't know, it's an external voice that probably talks to me or just like goes into my body and that just takes my body into that spiritual, sacred healing moment. I don't know. It becomes like something very sacred as well, which sometimes I cannot describe it myself. I always say one has to understand it is to experience it
Mm.
physically.
Mhm.
I cannot say to somebody, this is how you have to feel. Of course, like in the 80s and 90s, early 90s, when I was teaching and choreographing, I wanted people to feel the way I feel, not knowing that everybody is different because coming from the background of like shut up and dance. So I expected everybody to shut up and dance and do as they are told and feel as they feel. But then eventually I discovered, like in 1984, when I was working in Canada, a stage manager was the one who told me that there is only one Tebby, it's you. Those dancers are doing a good job. Let them be. Then I realized you don't reproduce Tebbies. You give them the material and you produce who they are. You are there as their guide. You are there to make sure that they're doing the right thing and see them as individuals. So it's also finding their own voices in what you are actually doing, because that actually bringing those different voices enriched this one voice. This one voice being this choreographic idea or what the story that I want to share. Because even like now working with other people, it's like everybody bringing in their own stories. And what is interesting, which also has affected me in my practice, is when I talk to dancers or creating something, or not, or other people, musicians even, and which actually happened also yesterday during my class, that the way they talk to me, it also how my body responds to their voices. It's kind of like very interesting to see them talk with the voice, but is my body reacting? And I have like one of my projects, dancers just telling their stories. And because I like to discuss it a lot with my dancers, but how do I react to what they're telling me? How does my body react to that? And how do they use their voice, and how does their voice hit on me? because I've seen people cry because like they let go of their emotions. I always say, just let it go. Because if you stop it, you create that confrontation and your body goes into this and your voice will not be able to come out because you put yourself into that prison of being squeezed into nothingness. But you need to do that. So I always say, take a moment and breathe into that moment.
Yes.
That's what, because it's that tension. We tend to create our own confrontation by not letting go. And I always say people have to learn to relate to their own soul. That soul being, as I mentioned before, being the body and the voice. It's also the light within our own selves as well. And we forget to do this actually. I sometimes do myself. I always have to remind myself, but because it doesn't really come naturally. So it's something that one always has to learn, keep learning, keep repeating, and all that.
Yes. Oh, Tebby, one last question, and then we close.
Mhm.
Well, Tebby, what would you tell somebody like me who lives in a big city, in an apartment with neighbors around, and so in public transportation with people around, not so much like nature spaces, and also maybe in a natural setting, I would. So in other words, people who suppress their voice, like I have a hard time imagining spaces where I can make these kinds of sounds and feel free. How do I connect? How do we as modern people in living in cities connect to these different sounds, in free ways?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, comparing being in the big city, that's noise, and then the nature, because I'm actually in the nature where it's silent and there's nothing.
Uh-huh.
I only hear myself and the sound of butterflies. Actually, that's all I hear. And I hear myself breathing. And of course, knowing in Paris, working in Paris, it's noisy. And when I arrive there, my head explodes immediately. So living in a big city is very, very difficult to actually shut yourself from all that is happening around. And I've tried myself. I mean, I've been there. I know what you're talking about. And I've struggled a lot to actually adapt from being here in Hashi, in this very silent place, which actually is a place that I call my silent place to rest. I hear no sound at all, and I'm just like this vast open space. And then, Paris is like noisy, and you have neighbors and all that. Everybody's making noise. And I have tried to like close my eyes and pretend that I'm not there. It works sometimes not. It's kind of like a very discomfort, and it's actually I will go back to that, like it's just like believing that I will be able to achieve this. But having experience living in big cities like Johannesburg, Amsterdam, and Paris, New York, and all that is constantly noisy. It's My only experience, I could say, is just close your eyes and pretend that you're not there.
Yeah.
And, sometimes I always just want to scream, and I sometimes have this imagination of being like in a small dark box, just taking myself into that and not seeing anything and not hearing anything. Or another actually good exercise that I have achieved to actually shut myself from everything that's around me is lying down, going into a meditative state, really emptying myself.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, what I use is images of the sea and the waves. And
Yeah.
the,
Yeah.
so just listening to that, going into my own world, just
Yes.
drifting away and breathing is one of the most important things. Listening to your breath constantly and letting your body just melt into the ground,
Yes.
letting go, your skin just floating. And I remember I actually did a workshop, and but actually this was always good for me because it happened on Mondays. And actually I would actually just like drift away and fall asleep. And after 2 hours, when I wake up, everybody has gone to lunch. And this is how far deep I went, and I had no sound.
Yes.
I had no sound. I just like emptied myself. And what is actually good, there's a music from this group Enya,
Mm-hmm.
which is actually many years ago. I used that in my when I was training as an actor. I used that. Also, just these images. It's also like a person has to create images in their own head, in their own mind, to follow that. Like as I said, I'm using like the waves of the ocean, the sea sound, the wind. You know that, like, just go there, just listen, this breathing. Most important is to have this constant breathing, not forceful breathing. And it's not only breathing through the nose and mouth, but the entire skin, the entire body has to breathe.
Yeah.
And then just let go, just melting just there. And if it doesn't come, do not force it, because that creates a confrontation and it will never work. It
Yes.
will never work, because then it's like you even end up hearing sounds that are not even there,
Right.
because there is all this, the body is going into knockers. So that's another thing. I've experienced it. That's why I'm actually bringing it up, because there's times that it just doesn't work. And then you're like forcing it, and it's like, oh, I want to get into that state. I want to get into that state. And it's not there. And the body says, no, no, this is not I want. So it's sort of like you're in a boxing match, with your own body and your own voice and your own breath, because the breath itself is the voice. I always like have this image of when, for instance, let's say you are walking around in a circle slowly, like we shall call the walk of life, and following the passageway of your breath. And what happens, and it's also that moment where that transformation takes over, and that emptiness, and to also create a state of emptiness to be able to take on that journey from that state of emptiness.
That's a beautiful place to end.
Mhm.
Tebby, where can people find you? Advertise.
People, people can find me. They can just Google me. Well,
Mhm.
I'm on
You have a
Facebook,
website. Mhm.
I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on X, formerly Twitter. I'm on, I have my website, tbodance.info. And people can find me teaching in Paris, can find me teaching in Luxembourg, can find me teaching in Barcelona, in Berlin, and also performing. And just Google me, just Tebby Ramasike, Tebby WT Ramasike, and you will find me everywhere. Because sometimes I'm on some websites which I didn't even know I exist in those websites. So I also Googled myself and I said, oh my God, what's happening? And actually realized I did things in my life that I never knew I did.
So I will put all of this info also in the description of the video below so people can contact you. And do you teach online also?
I actually, during the lockdown, the COVID lockdown, I taught a lot online. And I ended up teaching online and live at the same time. But I realized, as per advice of most of my participants, that I should keep separating both because it takes a lot of energy for me to concentrate on the screen and concentrate on the people. So it just happened that in one workshop in Amsterdam, I was teaching live and online at the same time. And then at the end of the workshop, I was talking to the people in the studio. I forgot the people on the screen. And they said, oh, they are talking to you. And I said, who? They said, them. And I said, oopsie. And I had been talking for like, a long time. So I actually mentioned it yesterday that I want to start to teach again online, probably giving my blessing ceremony offering online with my musician Ben Brown from Vancouver. And it's actually kind of like very interesting. You remember the workshop I gave for Sacred Dance Guild many years ago, one summer when I was teaching. I was in Paris in the studio, and all the participants were all over the world. And the technician, I think, was in Hawaii or something like that. And this was kind of like crazy. And I was just like, are we able to do this? Connect? I mean, Paris is in Hawaii and people are all over the world. And at first I thought, like, how does this work? But eventually, when I learned the mechanics of all this technical stuff, so like, voila, I should be able to do this. And I actually found it to be quite enriching because it reaches so many people from all over the world, and I can be able to share my work. And the feedback that I have received from people who join me online, it's really overwhelming. It actually enriched my Afro-Butoh practice. And
Yes.
also myself as a dance educator and dance teacher, also as a researcher in dance, because as I said in the beginning, my Afro-Butoh is an ongoing research because having experienced this also online, which I never actually thought I could do it online, because in the beginning when was a Butoh festival in New York, and I was teaching my Afro-Butoh online, a workshop in my hotel room in Paris. And I was just like, I was nervous not knowing how it's going to work out. It was the first time I did my Afro-Butoh online. I'm sort of like, wow, African dance is easy and Afro-Groove was easy to do it. But the Afro-Groove was the Afro-Butoh because for me, I always wanted to be there to be sure that the participants are safe and to actually be on that sacred ground together. But you being on that screen and being me on this screen was like, are they okay? Are they okay? Are they okay? So I'm like in my head worried, but afterwards they were giving me feedback and telling me how they were feeling and what did this workshop did to them. And people were talking about letting go of the demons that they've been holding on to and the dreams they had that night and what the images they saw. I said, oh my God, what are you doing? What are you doing? Do you really want to do this? But I actually realized it was not about dance. It's a healing, it's a spiritual healing journey. And it became something that's therapeutic, that is like healing everybody. Because we tend to hold on to too many pains and sufferings and whatever this world is bringing into our own bodies, which also affects me and also affects me as a human being, as a creator, as an artist, as a performer, or anything, as an educator. And realizing that finally people This helps people to share so many problems. It also helps me a lot to share this with other people. So, and doing it online has actually been something interesting, which I never thought I would, and I would like to do it again to continue.
Yes. The
So,
listeners are very glad to hear this, by the way, right away, because I'm sure they are from different countries also, so they can they can connect to you through online
yes,
teaching.
yes, probably because in November I will be featured in Seattle International Butoh Festival, where my film will be presented, will be shown. And I actually want to propose to do an online workshop because I will not be there physically for bureaucratic reasons. Um, but it will be something because there's a lot of people from New York, from the States, and from South America, Mexico, Chile, and all that I met through my online teaching. That I've been like, oh, when do you teach again? When do you teach again? So now this festival could be an opportunity to do that. Probably it will not be part of the festival, but it will be like something that complements what's happening in the festival. Maybe it will be before the festival, actually, as sort of like introducing myself to the people as well.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Tebby, thank you so much for adding your voice to this conversation about movement and the body and the wisdom of sensations and the senses. So we stay in touch with Tebby and feel free to ask him questions and subscribe to our newsletters and check us out online. And thank you all for liking this video and for subscribing and leaving us comments also. So until we see each other next time, thank you again, Tebby, so much for coming.
Thank you very much here. It's been a great honor. And thank you, everybody, for listening and for watching. And see you again and hope to see you online and share my work and physically in Paris. Thank you so very much and all the best.